The basketball court at the East Harlem Community Center had seen countless teenagers choose between two paths, one leading to opportunity, the other to the streets. Coach Teresa Martinez thought she'd lost 14-year-old Jamal to gang recruitment, until he heard A.P. Rocky rap about rising above circumstances that felt impossible to escape. When Teresa saw Rocky on The Tonight Show talking about his own journey, she had to stand up and tell the world how music became the bridge between despair and hope for one kid who just needed to hear that someone like him had made it out. As Teresa sat in the studio audience, her calloused hands told the story of 15 years spent dribbling basketballs and dreams in equal measure. But tonight, under the bright lights of late-night television, she carried a message that transcended sports. Sometimes salvation comes through headphones, and heroes speak in rhythm and rhyme. The Tonight Show studio pulsed with energy as Jimmy Fallon prepared to welcome one of hip-hop's most influential artists. A$AP Rocky, born Rakim Athalaston Mayers, walked onto the stage with the effortless swagger that had made him a fashion icon and musical innovator. At 35, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had transformed from a Harlem kid sleeping in shelters to a global superstar. But more importantly, he maintained the authenticity that kept him connected to the streets that shaped him. "Ladies and gentlemen, A$AP Rocky," Jimmy announced, and the studio erupted as Rocky took his seat, his carefully curated outfit a perfect blend of high fashion and street sensibility that had become his signature. "Man, it's always good to be here," Rocky said, settling into the guest chair with a genuine smile. "This show, this energy, it reminds me why I love what I do." Jimmy leaned forward with obvious enthusiasm. "You've been incredibly busy. New music, fashion collaborations, and I know Harlem has always been a huge part of your identity. Can you talk about how growing up there shaped who you are today?" Rocky's expression shifted slightly, becoming more thoughtful as he considered the weight of the question. "Harlem is everything to me, Jimmy. It's where I learned to survive, where I learned to dream, where I understood that creativity could be a way out. Growing up there wasn't easy. We didn't have much, moved around a lot, slept in shelters, but there was this energy in the neighborhood, this culture, this resilience that taught me I could be anything." The audience listened intently, drawn in by his honesty. "You've talked before about music being an escape," Jimmy noted. "What do you hope young people hear when they listen to your work?" "That they're not trapped by their circumstances," Rocky said without hesitation. "I want kids who are growing up like I did to know that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. That creativity, that vision, that refusal to accept limitations, that's what changes everything." His voice carried the conviction of someone who had lived this transformation firsthand. "And I want them to know it's okay to be different, to stand out, to pursue things that other people might not understand. Fashion, art, music, these aren't luxuries. They're expressions of who you are, and sometimes that expression becomes your salvation." That's when a voice from the audience cut through the studio atmosphere with the clarity of someone who had witnessed miracles firsthand. "You saved one of my kids with exactly that message." The studio fell silent instantly. Jimmy's head turned toward the audience, his entertainment host instincts immediately recognizing that something profound was about to unfold. Rocky looked up, clearly moved that his music had touched someone personally, his usual cool demeanor replaced by genuine curiosity and emotion. "I'm sorry," Jimmy said, standing up from behind his desk. "Did someone want to share something?" Teresa Martinez rose from her seat in the 7th row, her hands clutching a small team photo that told the story of hope in action. At 47, she looked every inch the dedicated coach she was. Strong shoulders from years of demonstrating defensive stances, kind eyes that had seen both triumph and heartbreak, and the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to see potential in places others saw only problems. She wore a simple blazer over her East Harlem Community Center polo shirt, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had earned every ounce of respect she commanded. "I'm Coach Teresa Martinez," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I've been working with at-risk youth in East Harlem for 15 years, and I wanted to tell you about Jamal." The studio audience was completely still, understanding they were about to witness something authentic and powerful. Jimmy walked to the edge of the stage, closer to Teresa. "Tell us about Jamal." Jamal Williams was 14 when he started coming to our community center, Teresa began, holding up the team photo so the cameras could see a young boy with bright eyes standing among his teammates. Smart kid, talented athlete, but he was facing the same choice that too many of our kids face. The streets were calling him. Rocky was listening with complete attention, his usual superstar composure replaced by the focused intensity of someone who recognized his own story in Teresa's words. Jamal's father wasn't in the picture. His mother worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. The gangs in our neighborhood, they see kids like Jamal, and they offer them something that looks like family, like belonging, like quick money. She paused, collecting herself. I was losing him. I could see it happening. He started missing practice, started hanging with kids I knew were trouble. I tried everything, extra attention, leadership roles on the team, one-on-one mentoring. Nothing was working. Jimmy nodded encouragingly. What changed? One day, Jamal came to practice wearing headphones, and he had this look in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not anger or frustration, but something like hope. He asked if he could play some music during our warm-up. Teresa's voice began to crack with emotion. It was your song, Rocky. Every day. And when those lyrics came on, I came from the bottom, now I'm up. Something shifted in that gym. Rocky's hands went to his heart, clearly moved by the unexpected impact of his work. Jamal told me later that hearing you rap about growing up in Harlem, about sleeping in shelters, about turning pain into purpose, it was the first time he heard someone who looked like him, who came from where he came from, talk about making it out without compromising who he was. The audience began to stir with emotion, understanding they were witnessing the real power of representation and authentic storytelling. What happened to Jamal? Jimmy asked, his voice softer now. He made a choice, Teresa said, beaming with pride. He chose basketball over the streets. He chose practice over parties. He chose believing in himself over accepting what other people said his life had to be. She looked directly at Rocky. Your music became his motivation. He'd listen to your songs before every game, before every study session, every time he felt like the easy path might be better than the right path. Rocky stood up from his chair, visibly emotional. Where is Jamal now? Full scholarship to Syracuse University, Teresa announced, and the studio exploded in applause. Basketball scholarship, studying sports management, wants to come back and work with kids like himself. The applause continued, but Rocky was already walking toward Teresa, leaving his position as guest to become simply a man moved by the power of purpose and connection. Teresa, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved Jamal. Music might have inspired him, but you were the one who was there every day, who believed in him, who gave him a place to belong. Teresa shook her head. We all saved him, Rocky. You gave him a vision of what was possible. Basketball gave him a path, but your authenticity, your willingness to be honest about where you came from, that's what made him believe it was real. Jimmy approached them both, understanding that his role now was to facilitate something more important than entertainment. Rocky, how does it feel to know that your music helped change a young person's life? Humbling, Rocky said immediately. This is exactly why I do what I do. This is why I talk about my struggles, why I rep Harlem so hard, why I refuse to let people sanitize my story. Because maybe somewhere, some kid needs to hear that they can make it out. He turned back to Teresa. But I want to be clear. You're the real hero here. I made a song, but you were there every day, fighting for these kids, believing in them when they couldn't believe in themselves. Teresa's eyes filled with tears. That's what we do at the center. We don't just teach basketball. We teach kids that they have options, that they have value, that someone believes they can succeed. Jimmy addressed the audience and cameras, his voice carrying new weight. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when authentic art meets dedicated community work, when someone uses their platform to tell real stories, and when someone else dedicates their life to creating opportunities for young people to hear and act on those stories. He looked at Rocky. You've always been vocal about giving back to your community. How important is it for successful people to stay connected to where they came from? Everything, Rocky replied without hesitation. Success doesn't mean anything if you forget the people who are still fighting the fights you used to fight. My responsibility as an artist, especially one who came from nothing, is to be a bridge, to show kids that there's a path and to support the people who are building those paths every day. Teresa nodded vigorously. And that's what makes the difference. When kids see someone who looks like them, who grew up like them, who made it out. It stops being a fantasy and starts being a goal. Jimmy sat on the edge of his desk, abandoning all pretense of formal hosting. Teresa, what do you want people to understand about community center work, about kids like Jamal? That they're not statistics, she said firmly. They're not problems to be solved or written off. They're kids with incredible potential who just need someone to believe in them, someone to show them options, someone to be consistent in their lives when everything else feels uncertain. She held up the team photo again. Every kid in this picture has a story like Jamal's. They all face choices between easy money and hard work, between instant gratification and long-term goals. Our job is to make the right choice feel possible, Rocky added, and to make sure they know they don't have to choose between success and staying true to who they are. You can make it out without forgetting where you came from. The audience rose in sustained applause, recognizing that they had witnessed something far more valuable than entertainment. They had seen the real-time intersection of art, community work, and social change. After the camera stopped rolling, something beautiful happened. Rocky and Teresa continued their conversation, joined by Jimmy and several audience members who shared their own stories about mentors who had changed their lives and young people who had overcome impossible odds. The episode became one of the most shared Tonight Show clips ever, not because of celebrity appeal, but because it demonstrated the tangible impact that authentic storytelling, combined with dedicated community work, could have on young lives. Rocky established the Harlem Dream Scholarship Fund, providing college funding for community center athletes who demonstrated both academic and athletic excellence. Teresa became the fund's first director, ensuring that resources reached the kids who needed them most. Jamal, watching from his Syracuse dorm room, called both Rocky and Teresa after the show aired, crying as he thanked them for believing in him and for sharing his story. He's now in his sophomore year, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while starting for the basketball team. The East Harlem Community Center received an influx of volunteers and donations after the show, allowing them to expand their programs and serve more at-risk youth. The center now hosts monthly Rise Above workshops where local success stories share their journeys with current participants. Rocky began incorporating social messaging into concerts, highlighting community organizations, and encouraging fan involvement in youth mentorship. His collaborations now include partnerships supporting programs. Teresa's approach became a model for youth programs, demonstrating that successful intervention requires cultural relevance and relationships. The Teresa Martinez method trains workers. The team photo was signed by Rocky and hangs in the gym, inspiring participants. Jamal graduated with honors and returned as an assistant coach, completing the inspiration cycle. His speech began with the song that changed life, because Teresa and ASAP Rocky taught everyone that authentic artists and dedicated workers can create spaces for young people to believe they write stories.